So, welcome to January's Cabinet and Happy New Year to everybody. We'll start with apologies for absence. We have no apologies for absence. Declarations of interest. None. Let's look at the minutes, pages 3 to 9 of the agenda. Are we happy to approve those minutes? Agreed. Thank you. Are there any matters arising out of the minutes? Okay, so moving on, agenda item 5. I understand we have some written questions from the public. Mr. Foreman, are you happy to take them read, or would you like to read them out?
I prefer to read them out, please.
Please.
The Council's medium-term financial strategy 2019-20 to 21/22 applied to tonight's Cabinet meeting in agenda item 11 includes consideration of the General Fund budget parameters as set out in Appendix A. Contained within these parameters is an item titled Staff Vacancy Savings Target. The assumption stated is 2% per annum for the coming years up to April 2022, this assumption being no change from that in February 2018. Consequently, please state A, how many vacancies were not replaced in the previous financial year, the current financial year, and the number of full-time equivalent posts this equates to over both of these financial years. B, the number of staff vacancies that is assumed will not be replaced over the next 3 financial years, and the number of full-time equivalent posts this will equate to over each of those financial years.
Do you want to read this?
Yes, please give it to Dan.
Okay. The staff vacancy target recognises that in any organisation there will be periods when, as a result of factors including resignation and retirement, there will be savings generated as a result of posts becoming vacant. The Council recognises this and sets the 2% target to reflect what is considered to be a reasonable level of savings that may be achieved as a result of such occurrences. The target does not set a figure for the deletion of posts, it merely level of realistic savings against the payment of salaries when staff recruitment is undertaken following a vacancy occurring in a service or team. Under normal practice, there would be a period for recruitment itself, and in most cases where a successful appointment is made, the new member of staff will be required to work out a period of notice with the previous employer, all of which results in a period of vacancy and the associated salary saving, against which this target is set. There are no staff vacancies that it's assumed will not be replaced over the next 3 financial years. The target for 2017-18, 18-19 was 2%, and the actual savings were 1.5% 2017-18 and 1.4% 18-19, simply because we have a very content and stable staff. Thank you.
Mr. Foreman, do you have a follow-up question?
No follow-up question, thank you.
And I understand you have a second question also for Councillor Gambers.
Yes, I do. Further to my previous question, as stated in Appendix A to the medium-term financial strategy, these staff vacancy savings are a, quote, target. Therefore, will Council management take such measures as are necessary to achieve these targets?
Well, it's like the previous answer, isn't it? As stated in the answer of the previous question, the target is set to reflect what is considered to be a reasonable level of saving caused by the transition periods between new and old staff. As a result of this, the Council's management is not taking any steps to ensure that staff vacancy target is met. I know you don't agree, but...
Do you have a follow-up?
No, I'm satisfied with the answers. Thank you.
So, there are no written questions from councillors. There are no petitions. So let's move on to agenda item 8, pages 10 to 20, the forward plan. Any questions on the forward plan? Councillor Andrews? Johnson, sorry.
Thank you very much. I've given Jane Greer former notice of the question I was going to ask. In July of last year, this Cabinet gave permission for consultation on the public space protection order. I'm just wondering when that's coming back, because it's currently not on the forward work plan, and possibly a supplementary depending on what the answer is.
The answer is it will come back on in March, and the reason it's not on there is we've been through such lengthy periods of PERDA that we couldn't carry out the consultation, so we just have taken it off. It needs to go back on and we'll go on for March.
Sorry, does that mean we haven't actually conducted the consultation at the moment?
We couldn't during PERDA.
No. So some consultations happened, but there's further consultation to do.
In which case, given that it's now going to come back in March and be added back onto the work plan, which is welcome, we need to see where we're at with that. Given not all the consultation is yet been done, would it be possible for this Cabinet to consider looking at re-including, given what's going on in the town centre at the moment, the number of complaints I'm getting, looking at the aggravated begging situation that's going on in the town and making sure that now is included in the consultation?
We are looking at that for that very reason at the moment.
Thank you very much.
Okay, agenda item 9, recent decisions taken by the leader, deputy or portfolio holders. There are none.
Chair? I thought you had, or someone had taken a decision. Well, it appears that the Science Library Museum closed and the museum was then brought back in-house. I assume that was taken as a decision by the leader of the council or a portfolio holder. So shouldn't that be reported here and discussed? Or perhaps it was done by the officers without the members' knowledge?
No, that's not the case.
No?
It was done following negotiations with the museum, clearly, and the members were informed on both sides of the chambers, I understand it.
But it needs to be noted.
It wasn't a decision by the members, it was we consulted, well, we told the members what was happening because they followed the negotiations. So it wasn't actually, strictly speaking, a decision of the leader or portfolio holder.
So who did make the decision then to actually bring the museum back in? I welcome the decision, I welcome that the museum's there, but I'm asking, who actually made the decision? Because surely the officers don't have delegated powers to make the decision to bring that spend back in-house, and if they did make the decision without the senior members, then there's a question about the governance arrangements of the authority. And if the leader or portfolio holder did make the decision, which again I welcome, then surely it needs reporting somewhere officially, like at this meeting.
My understanding was that following discussions with the museum, with Science Alive, they felt they couldn't continue, and therefore it obviously came back to us because it's our building. So there was no decision. There is the building, there it is.
And we've now reopened it, and we've put staff in, and again I'm saying, was that done under delegated powers, or did the leader or portfolio holder make a decision?
The leader was telling me he made that decision, yes.
Well, I think we need to formally note that here in this agenda, in this minute.
The decision was made, I suppose essentially by me, but in consultation both with portfolio holders and we informed
Indeed.
your side as well. So thank you, we'll amend.
Chair, I wasn't trying to suggest you hadn't informed anyone, I'm just talking about the governance arrangements of
Lovely.
making sure we know these.
No, you can be assured that this was fully discussed with everybody as it should have been.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Right, let's move on to agenda items 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 and 16, which I propose to take en bloc. Are we happy to take them en bloc? Agreed. Good. And I shall be moving that.
Secondly,
Thank you.
leader.
So just a few brief words. The national picture is one of uncertainty.
Absolutely, yeah.
Central government cuts continue to bite, and responsibilities once shouldered by the government are now devolved to local authorities often without the resources needed to deliver. However, there's considerable good news for Harlow in these reports, which I'm pleased to present to the Cabinet this evening with a recommendation that they're passed to full Council for decision. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all the officers and fellow councillors who have worked so hard in preparing it. This is a budget that delivers certainty and stability. This is a budget that maintains services and facilities. And this is a budget that includes a new provision for the long-term delivery of council housing. That this has been achieved despite the national picture, with a below-inflation 2% increase in Harlow's portion of council tax, in line with the projections of the medium-term financial strategy laid out a year ago, is a testament to Harlow Council's sound financial planning, efficient management of income and expenditure, and the benefits accruing to the Council from our decision to create a local authority trading company, HTS, tasked with delivering environmental services to Harlow. Thank you.
Thank you. Having come hot foot from County Hall today, the Tory Police Commissioner has actually increased the council tax by 14%, and that was authorised by the Police Committee, of which I was the only Labour member. In fact, I'm quite happy to go along with it, but all the Tories actually there voted for that, followed by the Commissioner actually recommending just under 3% for the council tax increase for the fire authority. And while I was at County Hall, one or two of the county councillors there led me to believe that the probability is that there will be a 6% next week, a 6% council tax increase. So that's kind of being set in the context of the three Tory authorities, controlled authorities, that will also be involved in the vast majority of the council tax. So part in that will be 2%, Chair, as you said, to maintain stability. I'm sure we're going to hear the unrealistic demands that there is no increase again this year. For 7 years there's been no increase in the council tax, as the opposition normally suggests. Then we'll be something like about £1 million light. But of course, when I made that point last year, I was told by Councillor Charles, sorry he's not here tonight, but Councillor Charles, they're not here to answer questions, they're here to ask them. So when I asked where that £1 million would come from, I don't know. So, no cuts or closures to any council services, unlike large numbers of local authorities being deprived still being deprived of government funding. Long-term funding of things like Pets Corner. We're being able to move things continually out of this discretionary fund. I'll make more of this at the council meeting because I've actually gone back and found out what the Tories' plans were in 2012, Chair, for things like Pets Corner and Playhouse. I've got all the facts and figures for the council meeting, which would be interesting reading. Funding for Harlow Carnival, the bonfire, the fireworks have all been actually brought back into the main budget. Sadly, because of the circumstances the last few years, the growth of homelessness means that we've had to put up to £200,000 additional monies aside for the plight of these poor people who, in my opinion, have been made unnecessarily homeless in the main, simply because of periods of austerity. The car park charges remain the same, the 3 hour remains. The council has made a commitment since we've been in power, Chair, to make sure that the staff are not just told that they're doing a good job, but unlike the previous administration, are actually paid accordingly, and this year there'll be a 2% increase. There won't be a freeze, nor would there be a decrease in their pay like the previous administration, but a 2% increase. So all in all, Chair, a satisfactory budget, given the financial circumstances that we find ourselves with. The government, as the graph would so graphically shows on, I haven't got a page number for this, but table 2, the chart of the annual reduction of government funding coming down since we took control from just over 6 million to half of that, to under 3 million. So we've had to grapple with that loss of 3 million of government settlements as well. So all in all, it's taken a long time to get things back on track, but we're back on track. We're slowly getting rid of the discretionary fund so we can actually bring all our discretionary services back in and guarantee them a much longer successful period and that will actually hopefully now, we don't know quite about the museum, but Chair, we will obviously be able to make more preparations for the museum and properly fund that as it always should have been, but because it was deprived of funds one can actually understand what has been happening. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Members. Any questions? Councillor Carter.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Burton will no doubt be relieved to know that the questions, well, most of the questions have already been submitted and all of them are already answered. If I can start on page 33 of the corporate plan, which is housing. In the 5th dash point under we will achieve our goals, Councillor Wilkinson says, consulting on the Council's preferred options for housing growth in the local plan. Bearing in mind you signed off the plan last December and it goes to public examination in public in about 4 weeks' time. I'm just wondering how you intend to do that.
The local plan has gone through several public consultations, included in the local plan are obviously all the housing options, so it has been consulted on with the public, and the public have had the chance to make their views known.
If I can now move on to page 46, which is the MTFS, page 46, paragraph 27B. Talk about the minimum balance on the general fund. It says, although this is the recommended minimum working balance for the general fund, it is recommended that the balance operates above this, enabling the council to operate effectively and manage its risks without contravening the minimum level. So the question is, why not increase the minimum balance having identified those risks rather than just a vague working above it?
Yes, please.
Councillor Danvers, do you want to take that on?
Yes, okay.
At the moment, it's difficult to make a clear judgment with the significant uncertainties that we face in 2021 and beyond. We are aware of the government's intention to significantly review our funding arrangements, but unfortunately, at this current time, there will undoubtedly be volatility during the transitional period as we move into that new funding regime, but we don't have details of exactly what it will be. So to review what the minimum balance should be against that uncertainty is extremely difficult at the current time. So the advice that I've provided is that we maintain a position significantly above the 2.5 million to enable us to see ourselves through that transition period with a degree of safety.
Yeah, I get all that, but what is a reasonable figure? Is it going to be £50,000, £100,000, £1 million, £5 million? Yeah, just saying, it needs to be comfortably above. Well, what's a comfort?
So I think that's what I was trying to outline in the previous response, in that until we've got an idea of how the formula changes will work for Harlow, we can't appreciate and specifically identify what our future funding arrangements will be. I'm hoping that through the early part of the 2019 sort of springtime that we will see further consultation that will enable us to be more specific about the local impacts, at which time we could quite reasonably be able to make another assumption and draw conclusions around a minimum balance once we know the facts. But at the moment, we just simply don't know the facts.
If I could move on to page 64, paragraph 6.2 about the capital receipt pooling regulations. it's a long, detailed question, a long, detailed answer. But basically my point is, well, those regulations are still in place. The consultation the government's doing is to keep them in place. So I'm quite sure why you can't refer to the fact that you can use the pooling receipts for house building.
Chair, this government changes policy from one year to the next. Housing was fundamentally interfered with immediately after the last election by George Osborne. The Tory government made this authority take on over £200 million of debt when we'd had no debt on our housing previously. They then assured us that we'd actually have a free hand for housing. That was all taken away. The rents were imposed upon us. In those circumstances, the vagaries of the present government, there is no certainty for the finances of housing at all. And going back to the previous point, if we're holding balances in excess of 5 million, we get criticised. When our balances go down, we get criticised. We can't win on balances, Chair.
I won't bother about politics tonight. But the issue is the government is consulting on whether to extend the period that councils can retain the pooling receipts to invest in housing. That's the only issue at the moment. The government is not consulting on removing anything else like that. So the facility exists now, and the intention is that the facility will continue. So I'm just wondering why there was no reference to it. But if that's your answer, then I'll take it. If I can move on to page 94 of the which is part of the Treasury report. Paragraph 4 says Treasury management continues to operate in a challenging environment with low interest rates and inflation above the Bank of England's target of 2%. I asked then, well, what level do interest rates cease to be challenging? For which again I'm grateful for the answer. So, because it's always going to be a challenging situation whether you borrow short term or long term, why there's a specific reference to the inflation target of 2%. Just wonder what the relevance is.
So in terms of the point raised, I think the fact that we have identified the challenging environment in the report, so the council has, for a period of time now, because of the issue around rates of borrowing and rates of investment, erred towards the approach of utilising its positive cash flow to internally borrow to protect itself against the low investment returns. And I think the reason we've kind of identified challenging is that over that period, over probably the last 4 or 5 years at least, we've actually been investing more than we've been borrowing and trying to achieve a rate of return on the investments that we make to enable us to use that return in the general fund budget. It has been genuinely a challenging situation. So I think hence the choice of words.
Page 123, paragraph 8. We say Harlow Property Limited was provided with 2 loans to support the development of an enterprise zone. I presume due diligence was undertaken before investing £2.5 million in this company. I believe I asked the same question about 2 years ago when the loan was made. To which the reply is yes, you have undertaken due diligence. However, there is no company registered at Company's House with the name of Harlow Property Limited. I checked. I'm just wondering who you lent the money to.
The company's registered in Guernsey, so it's not registered at Company's House.
Yeah. Interesting. Thank you. Moving on to the HRA, page 218, paragraph 34. We're talking about fuel poverty. the home energy study to which it refers to was undertaken in 2015. And so I'm wondering whether the number of properties that may be affected by fuel poverty has been reviewed following the recent increase in energy costs.
Thank you, Chair. The answer to that question is actually yes. In September, the Housing Stock Energy Study completed in September found that the fuel charges are similar now to 2015, and the recent rise in fuel charges has not increased the number in fuel poverty.
Thank you. That's good news. Thank you. Moving on to the general fund, page 137. Talk about the streetlights reserve. I just wondering for how much longer it will last and how it will be funded when it expires.
It will be. Sorry. It will be financed in exactly the same way as it is now, because we actually promised a couple of years ago, 4 years ago, well, coming up to 4 years ago, that the council tax increase would actually cover the street lights. 1.5% of that would actually cover that's as you increase council tax, you have that forever, and that is the money that remains in our budget. Negotiations are in hand at the moment with Essex to renew that programme as from April, and in that regard, the 4 years will be up. In that regard, we're hoping to actually get a better deal, because so many of the lights that have actually been installed now, I know we've got the flickering lights outside as well, but the LED electricity bill must be less than when we last negotiated, so we're hoping to actually get a better deal from Essex, but hopefully our friends on Essex, there's none of them here tonight, but our friends on Essex will actually help us with this and make sure that we get a better deal.
Thank you. Sorry, if I understand you correctly, Councillor Danvers, you're saying that because the 1.5% increase in council tax 4 years ago was taken into the base budget, that's how you're going to afford to pay it, but you haven't been topping up the reserve on an annual basis with the 1.5%.
There was much more generous, my recollection of it, there was much more generous amount made than was with the negotiations with Essex. I don't know exactly the figures, but it was certainly quite a bit more from memory. So we're quite content that we'll be able to actually renegotiate, but hopefully it will be we shouldn't have to pay for it. Let's face it, Harlow taxpayers are paying twice. They're paying twice for street lighting when Essex County Council should be picking up the bill. They're paying for police, well, not exactly police officers, but because the police are not actually doing their job properly in the High, we've actually had to pick up the bill for 4 police, police safety officers. At the end of the day, Essex have got us over a barrel because we want these things to happen, but we shouldn't, and Harlow taxpayers should not have to actually fork out twice for things that Tory Essex are failing to do.
Sorry, Essex is only paying for he's only paying for lights up until midnight. That's common across the county.
They should leave out the street lights on.
Possibly. But I don't quite understand. Sorry, I'm speaking as a numbers. I don't quite follow your argument. You're paying Essex twice the police because the police are its own authority, as you pointed out earlier on.
We're paying twice because what was it, 2 years ago? The police safety officers had to be recruited because of the lack of policing in the town centre. No, it's true enough.
And finally,
it's still a Conservative controlled authority that's actually
let's
making...
Let's move on to the final question.
And finally, on page 289, which is the actual budget schedules, under unadopted highways, the revenue budget is reducing from 226,000 to 174,000. So that's page 289, unadopted highways. Yep. Maybe
Pending set.
yeah.
Pending set. Okay. 289, sorry. Towards the bottom.
No, I have to.
We'll get back to you on that one.
Don't answer the question yet.
Oh, wait. I think it's
why is he jumping?
No. But it seems to contradict the environment portfolio holder's comment on the corporate plan, page 37, of a goal of investing in unadopted roads. I'm not quite sure how he's going to invest more in unadopted roads when you're cutting his budget.
We'll get back to Simon.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor
No,
Danvers.
it's a difference between what you say and what you do.
Let's move on. You've asked your final question. You've said we'll get back to you. Any further questions? Councillor Derrick.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to publicly thank the Section 151 officer for making himself available over the past month or so to answer my technical questions. So I only have a couple more just to ask tonight. It's on page 314 and 315 of the non-housing capital programme, table 7. Let's give everyone a moment to find that. On the original estimates that we were making, in terms of a percentage, if I can have that, what percentage were we building into our original estimate for the likelihood of overspend in these areas? So there isn't an allowance in the capital estimates for schemes to overspend. The business cases that are presented are challenged and expected to represent the cost of delivering each scheme. So is there a contingency? There is a small contingency of 250,000 in the current year's programme. And when you're making your forecasts, do you build a contingency into your forecasts in terms of how much the upturn's going to be? No, the forecasts represent what we anticipate the actual final cost of the scheme will be. So you don't allow for any actual potential overspend in the forecast itself? No. Okay. But obviously the forecast would include if there was, for argument's sake, during the delivery of a scheme, if there was a price variation that we had to negotiate with a contractor delivering that scheme, then we would have to consider building that into the forecast. And so when you come to the current estimate that you're making at the moment, that whole logic follows through. Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. I've got two questions. One that arises from the debate, the questions so far tonight. So the first one, perhaps Andrew Bramage was able to help since he gave the original. Can you tell me why Harlow Property Limited is registered in Guernsey, please?
Well, that's a decision for them, for their own tax affairs. The company is owned by UK citizens, UK residents who have chosen to register their own business in Guernsey.
Okay. Can I supplement that, Chair, with a question to you as leader of the council? Is it therefore council policy under a Labour administration to support companies that are registered in tax exile havens?
We don't have a policy on that, thank you.
But the one that you have invested in has been. Okay, thank you. And I have one final question on the corporate plan on page 36 to Councillor Harvey. Under wellbeing and social inclusion, it's a really interesting strategy that you've got there, but you've made no reference to, and I wonder why you've made no specific reference to loneliness or mental health. And I'm particularly concerned with those issues given the high priority they have, I think, for all authorities up and down the country. And wonder if that's something that you may consider actually specifically highlighting.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, but that is deeply embedded within the health and wellbeing strategy, so I think that we consider it to be covered off in that way. We're very tight on space, and we're very ambitious for the what we can achieve, but we did consider that and thought it was covered off on that point.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
So, any comments?
In the HRA business plan on page 164, paragraph 3, page 164, paragraph 3, there's a section which says the increase in those properties brought into compliance via actual internal works completion as opposed to being recorded as works refused or non-access cases. This is a very technical piece of the Modern Homes programme. If we contact a tenant and say we'd like to come in and carry out some works, they refuse, then we can tick that box of that property being compliant, even though it isn't. It's not for the opposition to praise the council, but I have to say I'm very proud of the housing department and the people who work there for all their diligence and hard work. Because what we have been doing is working a lot more closely, much more supportive of those tenants who initially refused to help them through the process. And therefore we're able to achieve a nicer home for them and also a proper decent home. I also understand through more intensive work, and we actually identified 2 abandoned properties which we brought back into the housing stock. So that's a compliment back to the housing department.
And that compliments much appreciated. Any other comments?
Chair, can I just reiterate, as I do at this point every year, perhaps given the media, the sole surviving media in the town now are here, we take the opportunity as an opposition, as indeed your party did when in opposition at this meeting, to ask technical questions, but not to get into the political debate around your budget. We understand this is a technical meeting for you to get your budget through the first hurdle and take it to the council. We'll be making the detailed comments on budget night, but thank you for the opportunity to ask the technical questions tonight and to scrutinise the proposals that you're bringing forward.
Thank you, and I very much look forward to that debate. So, are we happy to recommend that agenda item 10, corporate plan, agenda item 11, medium-term financial strategy, the item 12, capital and treasury report, item 13, the housing revenue account business plan, item 14, the housing revenue account budget, item 15, the general fund budget, and the item 16, the capital programme, are recommended to full council.
Great.
Thank you. So we now move on to agenda item 17, which is on page 321. I'll give you a moment to find that.
So moved, Chair.
Hang on, I haven't found it yet.
I've been told a quick way to do it.
Pages slightly stick
He's on
together.
paper, that's what
And-
I'm telling the trick, yeah, absolutely.
And I'll second that. Is there anything more to say?
Only that it's a government imposition. The only worry about it is if the government actually take the money away.
Any questions? Any comments? So it's recommended that this is recommended to full council. Are we agreed? Great. Thank you. Moving on now to agenda item 18, the disposal of land along Gildon Way to the Highways Authority, and that's on page 328.
I'll make this, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Stratton. Thank you, Councillor Purton.
Thank you, Chair. This report seeks delegation of the authority for officers to negotiate the terms disposal of 6 land parcels along Gildon Way. This is intended that these land interests are transferred to Essex County Council, Highways Authority, enable them to deliver planned road infrastructure improvement works associated with the M11 Junction 7A scheme. To ensure the mobility, the scheme EEC have applied for a compulsory purchase order. However, the preferred approach is to work with the relevant landowners, including ourselves, to secure negotiated transfer agreements. Delegation of authority is sought to enable council officers to take the opportunity to influence the terms of the transaction ahead of any potential future acquisition by ECC under compulsory purchase powers. Sale of the council's land's interest will both generate a capital receipt and facilitate much needed road infrastructure improvements. Thank you, Jim.
Anything you want to say?
Well, no. I mean, this negotiations have been going on for some time, and we're reaching the point where we need to make the decision and sign the documents.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Carson.
Thank you. I note on recommendation of the reason for the decision C, and it has been alluded to by Councillor Strachan, that the disposal of these bits of land would generate a capital receipt. But having looked at these bits of land on the map, most of them are verges or a corner or two corners by a roundabout. They're not very large pieces of land. I can't imagine they have a terribly high value. But without giving too many commercial secrets away, do they actually have a value?
Do you want to get one first?
Well, Councillor Carter's quite right. We're not going to start discussing sums of money this evening, but as with any transaction, something is worth what someone else is prepared to pay. And to avoid a compulsory purchase order, sometimes it's better to pay a little bit more than you think it's worth. But as I say, negotiations have been going on for some time, and we've reached a satisfactory arrangement with Business County Council, and we just need now to get on and do the business.
Okay, so it's recommended the Cabinet approves the plans to dispose of the Council's freehold interest in the various land parcels, and that we delegate authority to the Head of Finance and Deputy to the Managing Director in consultation with the portfolio holder as he would be. Do we accept that recommendation?
Yeah,
thank you. Right, I understand there are no communications from committees, working groups, parties and panels to be discussed tonight. So we move on to item 20, minutes of panels, working groups. So we're noting the minutes of the meeting of the Safety Committee, and we're noting the minutes of the meeting of the Cabinet Overview Working Group.
Agreed.
Are we agreed? Noted. Noted, thank you. I'm unaware of any matters of urgent business, so with that, thank you very much